How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this month's Pokemon Roundtable, where we discuss the most important topics currently impacting the Pokemon TCG. Joining me again this month, I have two of my favorite people from the hobby. Yours truly, Z from ZandGEmporium and Jake from Pokenomics. What is going on, guys?
Not too much. How are you doing? How are things going for you?
Oh, pretty good, man. Pretty good. Unfortunately, the good weather has ended here in Arizona. It seems like we are now well into the 90s, and yeah, our better days are behind us. Wouldn't you attest, Z?
Yeah, my wife's already complaining about it, so I already have to hear it until till like October. So, it is
Hmm.
what it is, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. As Jake's probably still wearing a sweater outside
oh yeah,
around this time.
yeah, probably.
Yeah, things are just starting to get nice over on the East Coast. So we're happy and our spirits are being lifted by the weather. So
Well, hey, we will go ahead and jump right into it. For anybody that is new out there, that maybe this is your first time watching the roundtable, just to give you a little bit of a premise on how we'll do this. So last time we each had, or I brought three topics to the virtual table here. And each round we discussed one of those topics. Each round, each person got their own time to discuss that, go over it, give their perspective on it. I thought that this month we would be able to open up the conversation even more if we each brought a topic to the table that we thought was pertinent and relative to the current market, things that are going on. So yeah, this time around we each have a topic to discuss. So if you guys are okay with it, I guess I'll go ahead and start us off here with this first round. And I thought something that was really interesting, just to give a little bit of background on my topic. The other day, I was perusing through the Pokemon Center and decided, you guys know as well as I do, there's never any Pokemon cards available on Pokemon Center. And I happened to click on Battle Styles and saw that they had Battle Styles regular booster packs available for sale, $3.99. And they were allowing people a limit of 72 packs that they could purchase for Battle Styles. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. To me, that gave the impression, well, maybe things are turning around. Maybe Pokemon has ramped up production of product to where they're now able to put the newest set Battle Styles out there and give people a limit of 72 packs. Well, it wasn't less than 12 hours later. Guess what? They were completely out of stock. And that really got me thinking to myself, when is this going to turn around? When are we going to get to the point to where when we have a new set that is released, that it'll be stocked on shelves, whether you're going to Walmart, Target, your local card game shop? At what point, or when do you guys think we will reach the point when the products and the availability of products will be similar to what we were used to maybe prior to the pandemic? Z, you want to start us off?
Um, you know, I would probably, this whole thing started with, the pandemic, this huge rise up and this huge demand. It seems pretty easy to see that it was because people were inside, people had a lot more disposable income to spend, people watch, more YouTube, blah blah blah, and they spent their money on things that they can do outside. I mean, you saw video games have risen in price, a lot of just retro ones, as well as like it isn't like the PlayStation and whatnot still just extremely hard to get. And just like anything inside there was just risen in price. And my topic has to deal with inflation on everything, macroeconomically. But you know, if in my opinion, I think it'd be a very interesting if we get to once either everybody who wants a vaccine gets it, and everybody who doesn't want it doesn't get it. We reach that point where it's basically anybody's going to get it, doesn't not. herd immunity. I mean, it might be like, this, I mean, it's approaching that in the US. You might see it like, let's say summer. If it gets to summer and it starts to become, everybody go outside, everybody can travel, everybody can spend their money on a baseball game and a concert, everybody can, go to bars, whatever. Okay. Just all these people who, were sheltered, and there are a lot of them. There are people who just, stayed out. They didn't really care, but there are a lot of people who stayed in. I could see it being very soon where it gets to that point where it's not an enormous demand. I really do, because, there's going to come a time. I mean, most people's stories who are, like my age, in their either in the late 20s, early 30s. A lot of it was, hey, Pokemon was really cool. You really were into it hugely in 1999, 2000, 2001. I think most people kind of stopped around, after Neo, maybe around Neo. I know people who just did the first few sets, left in gym. Now, if you were there during that time and you were in that kind of frenzy, it was hard to get booster packs. Really hard. I barely remember seeing base set. I barely remember being able to find jungle. I could find some fossil and Team Rocket. I remember like being always able to find base set too, which is, that's probably why it's still kind of shunned by a lot of people. It just didn't feel good to get a base set 2-pack even back then. But what happened was, and then Pokemon became uncool, right? And a whole lot of people left. A lot of people did other things. You went to high school, you thought about a whole lot about, your mind traveled to different places. And I'm here to say that there will become a time, and it might be very soon, where Pokemon is going to become uncool again. There's going to be a whole lot of people that are just going to leave, who are going to go to other stuff. And I think that wasn't a coincidence that this huge spike happened right when the lockdowns happened. It's too much of a coincidence to me that happened, and a whole lot of other stuff spiked, and that might be due to stimulus and this whole, other aspect of, the economy or whatnot. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the summer holds, because there's still there's the hype of the 25th anniversary coming, or the 25th anniversary set, right? Who knows what that'll be? People don't know yet. But maybe once you get to that, and I think that's like what, October or something. I think that's what it's scheduled as. Maybe it goes until then, but I really see people, doing other things. And I really think there's going to be a cool down and this whole frenzy. There's going to be a whole lot of people that leave. There are going to be a whole lot of people that stay. But I think the amount of supply that they're pumping out is going to all of a sudden, the demand will fall enough to where that equals. But that's just my opinion on that, of course. But that's just kind of what I see happening there.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting, I had the pleasure of speaking with Gary Hayes, aka King Pokemon, this week on the podcast, and we both had a similar sentiment of we couldn't understand how it is that other card games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, some of these other ones are able to keep most of their stock on store shelves, whether it's the big box stores or whether it's the card shops or their websites in general. It's interesting to see how they can keep plenty of stock, but Pokemon is completely run out. And it makes me wonder if maybe a lot of this, yes, undoubtedly, a lot of this is due to people being stuck at home and the pandemic and more popularity. But I also wonder how much of it is due to maybe Pokemon's negligence in planning for this and actually... Or who knows, the conspiracy side of me maybe wants to say that maybe they're relishing in the shortage of products and building up more hype for it. But yeah, that's just the conspiracy side. So what do you think about that? Do you think that maybe this is just a lapse in business acumen on their part? I would think that they would have the capacity to print these products to suit the needs of what the public is looking for.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, there's inflation in like literally everything. So, I mean, maybe they can. I mean, maybe the shortages with the COVID restrictions, maybe they can't find the hiring there. I mean, at the same time, I mean, we talk about, hey, why can't they print more? Well, why can't they, make more card savers, right? Why have those gone up more? Why can't they make more, lumber to build homes? Why can't there's so much? Why can't they pump more oil? Why has that gone way up? Why, there's just everything has inflated so much in this, period of time that I really don't think it does have something to do with the Pokemon as a brand, but it really has to do with just the macroeconomic, the entire economy as a whole. What's this huge machine? What's going on there? And Magic the Gathering, yeah, that's a big card game, but it just doesn't have the wide appeal that you can kind of create that demand. I mean, I never did it in did Magic the Gathering. That's not to say I didn't do any other card game except Pokemon, but that's just, I think Magic is it's just a smaller audience, just a way smaller audience of people that actually play that game. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Magic Gathering is more like playing, right? It's not as collecting, which it seems like a lot of these people who are collecting these, getting them graded, buying and selling. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's pretty extraordinary how much that and everything has just soared in price,
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, Jake, you're actually well versed in other trading card games, other hobbies as well. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I don't think that there's some conspiracy to not get, personally, that's my belief. I don't know one way or the other, and I think it's it's one of these things that my personal opinion is I don't think there's some conspiracy that Pokemon Company is not getting out product, or they could and they're not, to create some more short-term demand and frustration and then have some people leave. It's way too much of a gamble, and why would a company that size ever do something like that? And also, trading cards is one very small part of their entire umbrella of stuff that they sell and make money off of. So it just, I don't see that as being them having incentive to do something so kind of like manipulative intentionally. In terms of trying to figure out what's happening or what's going on, and I think this really goes into what James is going to bring to the table in terms of his question, around these, inflation. I think of a few different possibilities. One, there's a lot more money, out in the world in general. Two, there's just a lot more money in people's hands who would spend on things like Pokemon cards and other types of collectibles. Or three, people are just spending a lot higher percentage of their money on these types of online shopping and these types of things than they had before, because they're not spending it on other things, and or because it's gone up so much, there's just a lot more speculative mania and exuberance and fever and fear of missing out all happening, that's causing people to spend a lot higher percentage than they would. I think clearly there's been a big psychological shift in people's value assessments of these things. Mm-hmm. A year and a half ago, you spending $2,000 on a Pokemon card would be like a huge decision and a huge purchase for most people. Now $2,000, and it still is for a lot of people, but for a lot of people now, it's like people are dropping $2,000 very, very quickly on modern product, whereas $2,000 would have been a really big thought out purchase for a PSA 10 Crystal Charizard or something like that, and would have been like the crown jewel of your collection. And you would have had buyer's remorse probably, so it's an amazing how much the psychology, I think, of almost everyone, if not everyone, has shifted what's going to happen when that shifts back, if it shifts back. But to go to your original question about like when we're going to see more cards, nobody knows. I think that there are going to be a number of interesting factors. Pokemon has some interesting decisions to make on how much they decide to print things, how much they decide to scale up. Same types of decisions that like the PSA company are trying to make right now. How many more people do we hire? How much do we scale up? We don't want to overshoot, the future demand. Is this short-term speculation or is this long-term collector interest and demand into the hobby? The same types of stuff that everyone is asking. I think we're in a bit of a waiting game, and I think that there are going to be forces that push demand down, and there are going to be forces that push demand up. Some of those forces that are going to push demand down is going to be just, I think, some degree of boredom, and as James said, people going outside again, leaving the hobby, doing other things. But some forces that may keep people in is when cards finally get back on the shelves, there may be more people, there may be a bunch of people who come back, maybe a bunch more people may join the hobby. We may have some really cool releases this year, special releases associated with, big events in Pokemon this year, like we've discussed. So I think you're going to see that push or pull. And also when prices go down, that's going to increase demand, at least for a short time, unless the market panics. And so, and that's true for vintage cards, modern cards, wherever it is, because these items become cheaper and more affordable. And there are a number of people right now who are waiting to buy things. And they're gonna, as soon as more is available for cheaper amounts, they will be buying for some period of time. But if we look at, what happened with comic books and sports cards, there were these periods where demand exploded, and then they printed, too much or, a lot, and then the demand shrunk, and then there was a lot more of that product than there was demand for it for a number of years. And for a lot of things than has ever come back into those hobbies. So that's all of the stuff to think about, I think, regard to this. And in terms of what I'm doing, it's just kind of patience. I try to pre-order stuff. If I can't get it at pre-order, I don't buy. Like modern stuff, I like to open like one modern box myself. And in terms of like investing and what cards I'm holding, I'm selling quite a bit right now. I think it's a reasonable time to sell. And I'm not buying very much. I'm buying a little bit here and there. And the stuff that I'm holding, are the cards that I really love as a collector. But for the financial investment side, the stuff I'm holding is rarity. I think that as I study this market more and more and more, there are cards that are still going up right now. Although we're seeing retraces on certain things, the rarer cards are still going up in this environment. And I think that a lot of interest and demand has shifted to some of these cards. And as we continue to see retraces on vintage set hollows, we see increases on Worlds promos, on various trophy type cards, and also sets where there weren't as many of those cards printed. Some things in the Neo, although some cards have come down, others have stayed steady, and but I also would caution people that when you see prices drop, collectible hobbies the sales are extremely variable and should be, within like a 10 to 20% range, because you may have two people bidding on an item that bid it really high. And then as soon as that person gets the item, the next time there's only one person who is willing to pay anywhere near that on a specific item that a lot of people are watching. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage people to be careful to say, like, we've had a drastic shift in the market when you see like like certain cards, I saw videos in the last couple of weeks saying like, this card dropped 20%. Are we in a bubble now? Is it massively going to change everything? It's like, we're in the exact same market that we were a few weeks ago. And nothing has dramatically shifted yet. So I think there's a lot of people just kind of waiting, a lot of people looking for answers, and people don't have any answers because Pokemon doesn't really share that info. And the people who have the best answers, people like often like Danny Phantom and on YouTube have the best answers. And Mason from Cardinal Gaming, LGS stores, and people who have these connections with the distributors and often hear pretty quick about these types of things have some information, but also like very little. So I think that's sort of where we're at.
And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shining light. On the same token, I recently actually just got my reseller's permit here in Arizona, and have the pleasure of working with somebody local here, a local distributor. And he told me that this is by far the highest allocation that he's received in the last year, speaking of battle styles. So now, granted, it is a mainline set, which typically we see that versus a subset like Shining Fates. But I think there is, potentially a shining light there that things have started to maybe trend in the right direction. Hypothetically speaking, I'm interested to hear from you guys. When Pokemon does start to reprint products, when they do start to get their capacity at a higher level, what products do you think they are going to focus on, and how far back do you think that they're going to go to get those particular products in people's hands and on store shelves?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's the exact right question, but I think the honest answer is like, I wouldn't listen to anyone tell you, with strong opinions about what they're going to do. This is pretty unprecedented in this hobby, to know how Pokemon is going to respond. I think it'll be interesting, to look at this period in the future and see how they responded, and then maybe Pokemon will have a similar sort of response to a big increased demand period. When we think about what they did when we were kids, they made a base set 2, a legendary. They reprinted, base set many times because more people wanted it and these types of things. They reprinted Fossil and Rocket, so much Fossil and Rocket. They just reprinted it. I think that Pokemon will be very open to reprinting everything. I honestly don't think they owe anything to the secondary market on people speculating on any of these boxes. Actually, I think that the company owns the rights to do this, and they can do how they can do it, how they print how they see fit, and they're a business, so they're going to do what is in their own best interest. And I'm sure they have company ethics, but I think that historically those company ethics have been more around getting people products so that they can play the game and have fun collecting, not get people product that is going to go up and make them a lot of money on the secondary market. That doesn't seem to be the cornerstone of what a Pokemon's brand or what they've attempted to do. So it'll be interesting to see if they start printing more adult type collector product, if they start responding to this in sort of a nuanced way of like, we're going to partner with Topps again, and we're going to have like Chrome Refractor. We're going to do some of these like 101s, 199s of these interesting, cool things. We're going to have signed cards by the illustrators. And then we're also going to have the pure playing product. And that would be a big change for Pokemon to go into that sort of market. So until they do that, I would expect them to print as many of the sets as they possibly can. Any set that they feel like didn't get printed enough and that there was more demand for, I think they'll go back and print them all. But it's going to be a question of how much room they have on the printers, and then them deciding, we don't want to forfeit printing the new sets for the old sets. And so should we just pick a few of the biggest sets? Should we print a little of all the sets? There's an argument to be made that they could do any of those things. So I think.
Yeah, I agree with Jake. Who knows? If Nintendo, isn't their whole goal for like the players, right? So why would they? I think anything, of course, outside of, isn't it like 2-year rotation? Is that right? I don't know.
I think so.
Anything outside the rotation, I don't know why they would. They're just basically printing to. It wouldn't. But who knows? Like Jake said, who knows? They can do whatever they want. Outside of, printing exactly Wizards of the Coast, except I don't even know how that license was transferred anyway. But, it'll be interesting to see. But at the same time, you were just talking, about why can't they print more, more of this modern stuff so it can go all the way around? Well, if they're going to use that capacity to print, whatever, cosmic eclipse, I'm just picking something random, well, that's going to take away from, the 25th anniversary set or Chilling Rain or whatever, like the next ones that are coming down the line. So once again, it's like that weird situation of where are they going to, what's their whole goal? If the goal is to do collectors, then yeah, I mean, Jake might be right too. Maybe they'll just put out, there was a reason they put out first edition, sets, and then they just printed unlimited until people, kind of had their fill. So maybe they just do a set. It's like, hey, here's first edition, here's one of 100, and hey, that box can retail for $100 and it'll go immediately to the secondary market for $2,000. Who cares? Whatever, you can have it. And then they'll just print the rest of the stuff, to there. So there's just so it's a good. I hate to say it's a good problem to have for them because they obviously have a huge amount of demand, but at some point, you get a lot of customers, you get a lot of people who can't get the product. It's like the same thing with PSA, right? I mean, they had to shut down for, their goal is for 3 months because they just literally could not handle the amount of demand that, they wanted for their stuff. So it's all, it's all a crazy mess.
Yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. We were talking before the podcast on the demand on pretty much anything nowadays. And it really it permeates far beyond just Pokemon. And I think that Pokemon is just kind of getting caught up in that wave in many respects. But talking about demand, I think it's best to turn it over to you, Z, because I'm sure I know what you've brought to the table for us. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, I want to talk because there was, there's been a lot of talk about, the prices of Pokemon, and it's too high and nobody can find anything. And I think a lot of it has been put on, it's like, okay, people are, there might be influencers talking about it. And it's true that anybody who says, influencers or anybody who's on Instagram has a lot of followers, YouTube follows and followers, whatever, doesn't affect the price. They do, and they can, in many respects. I remember having these sealed Black Star promo number 13 Venusaurs, and I was like, oh, I bought like 40 of these. They were like $100, whatever. And then next time on eBay, they were selling for $300 or $400, and that's just, I'm not, I think at that time it was, I don't know, 7,000-8,000 followers on YouTube. It's not that much, that you can put out there that can make a dent in certain aspects, especially if something that doesn't have a ton of it listed. I'm sure Jake has mentioned some card, and I know Jake, I know you're very keen to know not to say certain things, that you might be buying, because I know you probably let it slip or something, or you've said it and all of a sudden it's, it might be, double the price or something. And once again, we don't have that much reach compared to a lot of, there might be people with hundreds of thousands, millions of followers that are getting into it. Right. So number one, I just want to put that aspect out of this. Definitely have some kind of influence, but there is literally anything that has any type of demand in this economy right now has soared in price. Like anything with any demand, commodities, talking about oil, gas, lumber, you're talking about collectibles, video games, almost any card game that has any type of demand has soared in price, even ones that were considered dead. You talk about clothes and food, like everything has just soared in value. So my topic is that I think that, really the biggest thing about this is that Pokemon would have soared no matter what. If there was nobody on YouTube, right? YouTube didn't even exist. Social media didn't even exist. In the same economy, it would have soared. along with everything else. Now, maybe it's a little bit more than usual, but we're getting to this point now. I listen to a lot of YouTube channels about the economy and how much this inflation is coming down the pipe, and how we're already seeing the massive amount of inflation in a lot of things. And when you talk about inflation, everybody thinks about, oh, you have $1 million in a wheelbarrow and you're walking to the store and you're buying a loaf of bread, right? That's kind of what people think about inflation. But that's the hype. That's way down the line, right? I don't know, maybe it's not, but that's an extreme example, right? That's like doubling in price every 15 hours, like Hungary did in 1940s, but we're seeing this huge amount of inflation here. And what I'm trying to say is that even if, we had this, discussion before about that you found battle styles and it was gone. It's like, when is this actually going to end? Could there be a possibility that just the economy as a whole, it's, we're going to get to a point where it's just going to keep going up to a point. My main question here is that, okay, if I give you, like, let's say evolutions, right? Isn't it still around $900,000? If you had, based off of everything that's going on with the economy as a whole, if it keeps going down this trajectory, are we going to see the kind of inflation where it's going to rise to a point where, your money is, because I know I'm just rambling. This is a typical, ZandGEmporium rambling here. But for example, you have, like grading companies, right? Grading companies. So, Beckett was like $10 a card. PSA was like $7, $8 a card. Not too long ago, like a year ago or so. CGC wasn't even on the market. Now, PSA's done for 3 months, even though they doubled the price. I mean, Beckett's like $35 a card with no subgrades. Economy, like, you get it back when you get it back. CGC is $9, but I would be shocked by in 2 weeks that they don't double their price again. Seriously. I mean, the amount of cards they're going to get is going to be absolutely unbelievable. So your dollar is just worth less than it was before with these increase in grading fees. Hey, guess what? You got to put your card in a card saver. Oh, that's quadruple in price. Grading fees are quadruple in price. All your product has doubled or tripled or however much X you want in price. My discussion is that, is it really the just straight demand of Pokemon collectors, that are causing this, or sports collectors, whoever's in it? It's just all of a sudden we have a huge increase of demand in people who all of a sudden want to buy houses, all of a sudden want to, buy Pokemon product, video games, Star Wars, Dragon Balls. I just want to really focus on collectibles here. Or is it really a story of, it's just the economy as a whole, and we're getting to this point where everything's going up, and it is what it is at this point. So I know it's just a weird, huge ramble, but I think you guys get my overarching question on that. And it's not really a question, it's just my thought process of trying to understand where all this demand, or is it it's not really demand, it's just a symptom of the overall market as a whole, the economy, the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars out there. So.
And then the important follow-up question for you, maybe to answer first, is, if you think that's the case, what should you do? Which is actually the most important question, probably, to help people.
Well, at this point, though, like, you could see two ways. You could see, like, if I talk evolutions of $1,000, you could see evolutions being worth $10,000 in a year, or you could see it being worth $0 in a year. It's really a symptom of, it really is. I mean, if you're talking about this inflation that's happening and everything, it could just, explode it way up into the stratosphere, or it's becoming so worthless that you're putting everybody's gonna put all their money into actually the stuff that really actually matters to them, right? Shelter, food, clothing, commodities, in that one. So all of a sudden, nobody has demand for Pokemon. So, I guess it's not really a question, but more of a topic discussion of just it. Do you guys really think that all of a sudden everybody just all of a sudden demanded everything that had any type of demand beforehand at once? Or is it just a symptom of there's a whole lot of money in the system and either the money's going to be taken, the money's going to stop and all of a sudden, or it's going to keep going and we're going to see this big inflation,
Well, it's definitely not just inflation. I think when we look at food, it's maybe up like 3% in price on average or something this year. I might be wrong about that, and Pokemon's up 10 times in value. So I think that if it was truly just inflation and not an increase in demand or where people are moving their money, then you'd see even amounts across if technically if spending was the same across everything. So I think for me, so much of it is the psychology of what I was talking about earlier. I think of that. What happens when you go through boom periods is everyone's relationships to Pokemon or to what they're investing in changes so radically, and everyone just becomes so much more bullish and positive and less and so risk averse. What happens when you make a lot of money in something that's very risky? Over time, you become much less risk averse. And I think probably both of you can relate to that. I know, James, you can, and because we talked about it, this idea that the purchases that you might make now, and I think you're still very cautious probably and have those talks with your wife and their big purchases. But I bet if you think back to some of your early big purchases, how much more risk averse you were probably to spend a lot less money, and how now you're willing to spend so much more money so much more easily. Is that true? Or
that's I think I guess my situation is a little different because I'm using basically stuff I'm flipping, so the more I get, the more I can spend. But
that too, but that's fueling the market also. But that's not, none of that, all of that is psychology. It's not necessarily irrational or not good to do that, but it's sort of like understanding that all the people who were here originally, although we have maybe this price memory that stops us from buying more, we are taking so much profits that a lot of us are just reinvesting back in, continuing the upwards flipping cycle, of movement. And right. I think that it's like when that shifts, what does that look like and how dramatically does it shift? And does it shift all at once in an extreme way? Or is there like a back and forth? And because I view it more as like, I think there will be downward pressures on the market and there will be upward pressures on the market always, and this year there were so few downward pressures. I feel like I was talking into the wind for a while on my channel as probably the only person talking about risk and, be careful and these sorts of things. And like everyone else was, that I could imagine. And now the conversation has really changed to like, okay, no one really knows. Like, it's been great that we made a lot of money. It could go up more. It might not. What's going to happen next? Like these types of things. So I think the market and the psychology has shifted already from that environment into this environment. And where it will go next, will it go into a fear, panic, environment? But going back to your first question about these macroeconomic effects, I think the really interesting question too is, and the point you made is, when do people need their money to spend on food and their lives again? Mm-hmm. And what will it take to switch? Will it be that you're not just going to make money forever by putting money into these things, and it's not just a cash machine that goes burr and you just rake in money and then that will shift it back? Or is it going to take something more extreme, like mass unemployment, people losing, safety net being slashed because policies change in government, whatever it is. And that's the type of macro stuff. And I think for the audience, what's really important is the more complicated it gets, the harder it is to predict anything with certainty. And the more, for me, I respond to that as like, that's just more and more risk. And so I have to prepare myself and make myself comfortable with that. I think other people might say, well, nobody knows, so I'm just going to go ham and spend a ton and let's just gamble and see where it goes. And I think that's perfectly fine. It's someone that's a temperament and personality thing. I think that there are times when it's very clear or more clear what's going to happen, and people do very like obviously irrational things. I'm not sure we're in a time where there's a clear decision to make here. Should I put my money into this? Should I take all my money out? I think you can make a good case for selling right now. So I've been talking to people. I can make a good case for selling my entire collection. I can make a good case for selling just my easier to get cards. I can make a good case for selling just my higher cards because they have the farthest to go down and retrace. And maybe I have most of my money in the rarity, and they may not retrace in value, but they may become very illiquid, and I might not be able to sell them. How do I keep a certain amount of cash reserve to buy up opportunity while balancing the fact that maybe that cash could be worth less in a worst case scenario inflation situation, as James is talking about here. That's where everyone's at. So I think one thing just to understand, if you're stressed out and confused, you're in good company with a lot of people. And I think we'll do our best on each of our channels and with our communities to help people just kind of stay calm and navigate it as it goes. And as new information comes up, we can just continue to talk about it all together. And I think that's very helpful to make sure that everyone's thinking about it as fully as possible. And again, for me, preparing for the worst. And it's just the way that I invest and I function. So
that should be, you should have that as the description of each one of your YouTube videos from now on. Just preparing for the worst. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. And like you said, I think that it's discussions like this that are really important at this time, because we've gone through that fervor period where everybody was just pumping out everything that they could on Pokemon. Pokemon was to the moon. And along with you, Jake, and I know Z, I remember watching your early videos cautioning folks on this hobby and investing and creating a business. I did the same thing from the very beginning. Having had that financial experience, being a financial advisor, you become, and also being acquainted with other markets as well, with real estate. We're seeing something similar right now too, where I feel many people are over leveraging themselves on their assets. People spending 20, 30, 40% above market value on homes just so that they can get into homes. And we've got this culmination right now, in my opinion, where you have the fervor of Pokemon from the 90s. You have a unique economic situation like we had in 2008, 2009, where so many people lost their job. The economy really took a hit. But at the same time, this is also very different in the sense that we had a lot of stimulus pumped back into the economy. And we're still getting that. We're still getting money pumped into the economy. People are still getting money put into their pocket. Forbearance periods are still extending. People are not having to pay their rent. They're not having to pay their mortgage. And so it's just it's such an interesting dynamic that we have right now where, in previous points in history, you were talking about, I think you referred to the 40s. If we would have had a situation like this back then, everyone would have pretty much been on their own, and it would have turned to the necessities, the food, the shelter, the clothing. But now we do have kind of this father figure, so to speak, that is taking care of us in the sense of stimulus and kind of foregoing the inevitable in many ways. And we really haven't had to face that final end product, which this is all going to have to be paid back at some point in the future, whether that's through taxation, whether that is through, you guys have seen what has happened to gas prices, right? We're starting to see that, as you said, with food. And it's just something that folks have to be cognizant about, in that this is something that is not going to last forever. And to me, my big saying, my mantra has always been diversification. I think the best thing that you can do is diversify your assets and not over leverage yourself in one area or the other. Jake's smiling at me because he's like,
I'm smiling at John, who's commenting on my smirks. And sorry, I don't mean to distract you. I'm listening to you too.
But I think, and I'm sure you guys can probably agree with this, in that, diversifying yourself, spreading your assets out among other things so that as the markets change, you can start to lean or hedge yourself in one area with another. And I think people are learning that. Yeah. A lot of people are learning that now with Pokemon, in that it's not just always going to be to the moon. There's a lot of risk involved in here. And it's a matter of being able to balance risk versus reward, and also look at the long-term picture of things, where we're headed, and where it's all going to pan out in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a weird time out there. You don't stimulate an economy unless it needs stimulating. So they just keep pumping it out. So there's something they're putting. Don't laugh at me, Jake.
So somebody is going to take clips of that and put together a little montage.
Of course they will. But it's true. They keep pumping out. So there's something beneath that they keep seeing, that they keep having to put trillions of dollars out there for people. So, I'm not going to be the. I'll just say like Jake. Prepare for the worst, but just be cautious. Don't be stupid. That'll be my ending thought on that topic.
And to kind of just go to both of your points, like what I'm actually doing is I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'm doing some saving of like my rarest cards, some saving of my less expensive collection cards that I just really enjoy and I'm willing to take a loss on if they go down. I'm doing some selling, of all of those things across the board. And I'm sort of putting bets on a lot of different things. And then I'm just, using my knowledge of the Pokemon market to continue to look for deals, look for opportunities in other places. I invest in and buy a lot of different across like 5 or 6 different card games right now. So I'm always looking for opportunities and then, for me, the big question is how much cash should I keep and when, and that's what's keeping me up at night right now, is trying to answer that question for myself. And it's difficult. I look to like Warren Buffett, right, as an example of this, as someone who has kept cash for many years. Berkshire and Hathaway has a humongous cash position and has used barely any of it, because I think he looked out and he didn't see any deals. He didn't see anything that was worth buying and would rather have that cash. And they're fundamentally value investors, and they don't pivot from that. They don't invest in momentum and hype, and so they missed out on all of the growth stocks over the last 3 years because of that. And I think unfortunately for them, they weren't able to. They basically the Fed and the government bailed everyone out this time, instead of people going to Warren Buffett to bail them out like they did last time. And that's how Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett made so much money 2008, 2009, because they bailed out some of these banks and got preferred stock options and made tremendous deals. And that just didn't happen this time, even though there was this tremendous crash in a staggeringly short period of time in the stock market this year. And then a miraculous extreme recovery, despite the jobs numbers not recovering that much. And this will be studied by everyone interested in investing in finance, from the big brainers with the fancy degrees to the internet guys, to people like us and people who are watching this, and it'll be great to look back on this and learn lessons. And frankly, I think that the government and the world is taking a huge risk, my personal opinion, with these types of monetary strategies that have never really been tried before, with a theory that we can sort of like print our way out of this. We can stimulate the economy enough that we can grow it enough that it's going to end up being able to pay things back. It's an interesting theory, and only time will tell if that actually works or not. And then, of course, bringing it back to Pokemon, as that unfolds, I'll be talking about that stuff on the channel because it relates to collectibles. It relates to other types of investments, and it all trickles down. Although, as we've seen, not on a 1-to-1 ratio, and it can be very interesting to predict when one goes down, the other might go up, and then trying to figure out why that is. Why did the stock market crash while Pokemon was at an all-time high this year, right? And obviously the stock market's come back and is at an all-time high again now, but all the little intangibles of people being at home, not having their other hobbies, having more expendable income, those types of things. But and that's also what I think brought the stock market back too, honestly. But yeah, it'll be my view of it is that common sense drove the stock market down because businesses were shutting down and they weren't making profits, and people were being rational and smart.
Yeah.
And then basically people just having tons of money and access to Robinhood and these types of things is what and just printing money is what brought it back up. And the long-term effects of that we have no idea. But I don't think it's necessarily a collapse. I think that it's interesting how people just come out with such confidence on what's going to happen. And that's where I'm glad in the Pokemon community we can have these types of discussions where we're not, I think, misleading people or trying to sell a education course or a brand that one of us has the answers to these sorts of things. And I see that sort of like everywhere online right now in lots of different spaces, people claiming that, follow me, take this, diamond hands is the way, no, sell everything, buy the dip, whatever it is, all these crazy memes and ridiculous things going on. So
it's those are all really, really good points. The one thing I will say, Warren Buffett sold all of his bank shares and bought into Barrick Gold. Actually, no, it wasn't Barrick Gold, but it was gold. And just to hit on your point there of, why Pokemon, the stock market, you see it tanking or going down, you see Pokemon going up. I think it's probably similar in a sense to why we saw gold and silver hit highs as well. I think it's the exploration of alternative assets for many people, losing trust in the standard financial markets to some degree, and just taking a little more risk, exploring other alternative assets out there. But well, Jake, absolutely. You want to finish us off here? Gosh,
I can.
Somebody is going to put together clips of this in a montage. We've said a lot of innuendos in this discussion.
Yes. So the topic I wanted to talk about was PSA closing. Closing, the effects that it's going to have on the other grading companies, the effects, and most importantly, the effects that it's going to have on the home market. I don't think it's been talked about enough in any video. And I think part of it's because it's really complicated and no one knows, and there's going to be a lot of speculation. But I think it'd be good for us to share our opinions on it because it's dramatic. That is a dramatic shift in the number one way speculators and flippers are making money, which is grading cards quickly and then flipping them for profit. And that's been the widest margin. Well, the two things have been the widest margins. Online box breakers is by far the best business in the game. They can make thousands of dollars an hour, $1,000 an hour, a few $1,000s an hour, all sorts of crazy things depending on the prices they're charging. But the second best play right now or play over the last 6 months has been buying raw mint cards, flipping them quickly, selling them into the market, getting them back before other people get them back, trying to constantly be ahead of the curve before the next thing moves. That's gone now. Now there's so much of it still at PSA in bulk that it's not really gone for the next like a year and a half. So it may not, it's sort of like, yes, people can't do that anymore. And so people may leave, the hobby, a lot of people might leave the hobby because of this, and leave as in just like they're not really like engaged in collecting it in the hobby, but stop trying to make money on the hobby in the short run. But I'm really interested. So a few things. I'm interested on how it affects the prices on cards that have already been graded. Your guys' thoughts on that? I'm interested. Do you think that the effect, like the psychological effect, all that is going to have? Is it going to raise prices on cards? Is it going to lower prices on cards? Is it going to cause confidence and comfort knowing that they're finally going to catch them and get more out? Or is it going to cause fear and hysteria knowing how many cards are there and knowing how many are going to come back? And this feeling of like, I spent $20,000 on these raw cards thinking I could send them in and flip them. Now I can't. I have no options. I can send them to CGC probably for a very limited window before they're going to shut down also. But if I get 9.5s, which I probably will, because it's much easier to get a 9.5 than a 10, I'm going to lose a lot of money because PSA 10 is where all the money is still. What are your guys' thoughts on all of that? PokéNav, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I see it kind of in a short-term and a long-term effect here. In the short term, with PSA, with Beckett raising their prices, I think it presents a lot of opportunity to CGC. But how long can that really sustain itself with them? As you said, at some point, they are going to receive such a vast amount of cards that they are going to be in a similar situation. So in the short term, I could actually see, because of the price increases, actually that having the same effect on the prices of cards, especially if those cards, all of the ones that are in backlog, remain in backlog for a period of time. I could see that in the short term, the prices on cards do increase generally across the board. However, when I look at the long-term effects of this, I also had the pleasure of speaking with Tom and Connor from Graded Gem, and we were talking about this same situation of what are grading companies going to have to do? How are they going to adapt? How are they going to change to meet this ever-increasing demand? As long as it does continue at the pace that it's currently at, how do they keep up with that? And I think inevitably it will end up where, whether it's PSA, Beckett, CGC, whether they all do it, I think we are going to move more to a computer-based or algorithmic-based grading system where you send your card in. We've talked about it before. It doesn't matter if you send it through 10,000 times, it's going to come back in the exact same grade. Now, whether those three companies do it or a startup comes out and they do it, there is a market there of being able to get cards back to the consumer faster and with more consistency. Beyond that, I could also see PSA, Beckett, CGC moving more towards a value. I guess you could probably call it like a value-based system and we're kind of seeing that with PSA now. Where it's really their top echelon, where it's very expensive to have your card graded, and maybe that's what you do. Maybe you send your card in your Pikachu Illustrator cards or the top tiered cards, you send those into PSA, and maybe there is a much more thorough process where they go through, they authenticate it. Maybe there's some kind of certification that goes along with it, something beyond just the slab and the authentication. And PSA is looked at as the gold standard for the highest tiered cards. I could also see Beckett doing that much in the same manner, where we have a Beckett Black Label 10. I could see them moving more towards that, where they're only accepting cards above a certain value for people wanting to get that that top prize, that top tier. But CGC is a combination of really both of those right now. They use the computer-based grading, they use the human grading, so they're kind of a hybrid. And I think they have the choice now of which direction do they want to go. Do they want to move more towards that value-based grading system for the top cards, or do they want to move more towards the call it the Costco, where they're able to push cards back out to consumers at a faster pace, where they're solely focusing on that computer or algorithmic based grading. So that's kind of my summation of it, where when I see these prices going up, I think in the short term, prices for graded cards, at least the ones that are coming back onto the market, trickling back onto the market slowly. I think we will see an increase in the short term, but as that backlog does come back out, that we'll see a retraction, we'll see a correction because of that. And then at that point, it's really what are the long-term impacts of this? If PSA does decide that they want to continue with this, they want to continue with eliminating maybe their value, their economy tiers, what's the end goal for them? They're now a privately held company, and I can assure you that they're wanting to leverage, use more financial leverage now that they are a private entity. So it'll be interesting to see, but that's kind of what's been running through my mind with what we've been seeing across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I wouldn't be surprised when PSA reopens. I mean, their cheapest card is like $50, to get graded. Wouldn't be surprised at that time too. Beckett is 50 and CGC has increased however much. I think it was a pretty decent, for the longest time, it was like you submit a card, you get a 10, great, you made some money. You put a 9, you basically broke even after the fees, and then 8 below, you lost money. And that seemed to really make people be really cautious in sending stuff, because it's hard to get. It's really hard to get a 10. It's kind of hard to get a 9, unless it's non-hollow center, well, whatever. So these prices for everything, we're talking like sports, just base cards that you can get in most boxes, and a lot of these cards that people just have around in Pokemon. You could send it in, you can get a 7 and you can make money on some of these. And it became that point where you really the companies were made to authenticate, sure, and that's in whatever grade it is, but a lot of times you're sending it in to get those mint grades. People were just sending in everything because it made sense. You saw the price and it's like, okay, well, Rocket Edition Squirtle common card is $300 in PSA 10 or whatever, 100 something in PSA 9. It's like, well, of course I have 20 of those, well, I'll just send them all in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they get an 8 or a 7. I'm still going to make, probably off that $10, $20. So it just really didn't make sense, the prices they were. And this has been since the demand started, like last March or April, when they had that quarterly special that they brought out for $750, which is like one of the weirdest moves, a company I think has ever done. You have really high demand and then all of a sudden you lower the price. So I think it's just, everybody just has had too low a price for a long time. Just the market moved quickly. Market moved very quickly. Sports, Pokemon, everything, to where these companies, it's not like, I don't think there was an increased demand. There was an increased demand for grading, but it's just they had so many other grades that made sense to grade. It's like 10s, 8, 9, 7, 6. I mean, in some cases where it made sense to grade. Whereas before, the price, it's like, okay, well, if it's a 9 or 10, I'll submit it in. So I think these prices are, until, we get some kind of big market retrace and the demand drops through the floor, I don't think, and it doesn't make sense for them to lower the price at all or keep the price the same. Just simple, econ 101. So how that affects the, actual market as a whole, I don't think after PSA reopens and the looming, I'm sure there'll be some kind of big CGC increase, and Beckett's just its own, that takes forever them, and they're, I think, $20 to $30 a card. I don't think you're going to see much, if any, of these bulk cards sent in anymore. I think you're going to get this huge batch that was sent in the past however many long. You're going to get all those back, and there just aren't going to be any more, because it's just not going to make any sense at all to send these in, because you're going to have this wave that's going to come back, which is going to lower the price for a lot of these. Like I was saying, the first edition Team Rocket Squirtle, that's not going to be a $300 PSA 10 card. unless, my whole argument about inflation, it's going to be worth, $10,000. But, that's the big supply is going to come back. It's going to drop the price to where probably whatever they're charging, it just doesn't make sense to send in anymore, which then that's going to cascade it to where, okay, well, they're not going to get any more submissions. Let's assess the situation about, should we lower the price then? But it's going to take a long time because, like Jake said, there is so much backlog that it's going to take years to flush it out of the system first. So I don't see prices ever going below where they are now, at least for years and years and years, just because there's going to be a whole lot they're going to come back, and that's going to affect that. And then people just aren't going to send it at those prices. But yeah, it's it's a lot to wrap your head around,
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think my one counter argument just on the last point is that it'll depend on how quickly they ramp up their operations, because they're going to be leaving so much money on the table to not take on more cards, particularly for these higher prices, that how quickly will they be able to ramp up their operations and buy, they need to buy warehouses in Missouri, in the middle of the country where it's cheap, not in California. And it's very odd. Their business is odd. They could clearly figure out how to do it in a way that would be much more cost effective, cheap, and effective for them by building different places in different areas in the country. Also different areas that are closer to certain So there's a lot that they can do there. I agree with all the points you guys said.
I get it's going to get to the point where they're going to, it's hey, why don't we keep the price at $50 a card? Let's say they raise the price to $50 a card for just the regular submission. It's hey, we can grade 50 cards and we can have a $50 a card and we can grade 10 cards, or we can lower it down to $10 and get 50 cards, which is going to be, 5 times the work for the same amount of revenue. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to, I think they're going to be, be at least their board or members or whoever runs these companies are going to be pleasantly surprised that they're going to raise these prices, and they're probably going to make the same amount of revenue because it's just going to cut down, and, they can actually get caught up. It's just, it really, it's just,
it's tricky though, because it's the danger is if they raise the prices really high. So now the case becomes such a high percentage of the value of the item, whereas before the case has never been, it's a fractional percentage of the value of the item. Mm-hmm. In the future, if they keep raising their prices higher, now people will want PSA cards, not because the card is so valuable necessarily, but because getting it in a PSA case is difficult to get and expensive to get. Mm-hmm. And that will add a lot of value in and of itself. Does that make sense? Because people are PSA collectors. They want to have a PSA 10 and are willing to spend that extra huge amount and have 50% of the value be in the case, or 75% of the value in the case. We might see really crazy things. I think the other thing to think about is if that happens and then demand drops, what does PSA do? Because if PSA then lowers the prices of their cases, they've just destroyed the confidence, the market. All these people have paid these higher prices for these cases, have put all this money in these cases, thinking maybe they would never go down. There are a lot of ripple effects that are going to that happen from these boom periods, and companies figuring out how much do we react to it? How much do we raise prices, understanding that these boom periods are not going to last forever? And then what's going to happen? People are not going to be willing to pay these prices forever, or the financials aren't going to make sense because they need people to send in modern Pokemon and modern sports cards. Now, modern sports cards is a much, much better business and vast majority of their business, right? And the reason modern sports cards are so great for them is because modern sports cards is an adult-led products where there's always going to be modern cards fresh out of pack that are going to be going for tens of thousands. And as long as it stays hot, there's so much value in all those things. But in Pokemon, if it costs $50 to grade, eventually these vintage cards will all be graded, or the vast majority of all these things will be graded. And the only things left to be graded will be modern. and the newer modern, like the brand new product. And so if none of that gets, if no one sends any of that in because none of it is worth the price of the grading anymore, or only a couple of the biggest Charizard chase cards are, how much business are they going to lose? Then are they going to lower prices, or is sports going to be enough to keep it going? Those are all the types of things that it's going to be interesting to watch, I think, in those dynamics. But
but it was at that point, like not too long ago, where people didn't send in a lot of this modern stuff. It just that's how it worked. Unless you pulled a rainbow rare or something that's a decent value. A lot of stuff wasn't the chase card from the set. People didn't send in these cards at all. People didn't send in evolutions.
Sure.
Commons, or
but their costs were so much lower. So now if they open up all these new facilities, hire all these new people, they're going to need PSA was like tiny before all of this. PSA was a tiny little company. Now they're entering this is like the big leagues in terms of both sports. Who knows how many how much it's multiplied in size. When they tell statistics, like in the last 3 days, we've gotten as many cards as we've gotten in the last 4 months or whatever. It's like, that's an unbelievable multiple. And if they build it out to demand, their overhead is going to be so expensive that then they're going to need to keep up a certain amount of demand that's much higher than it ever was. That Marvel, that Yu-Gi-Oh, that Star Wars, that all of these things that new companies are probably partnering right now to create new Star Wars cards, new Star Trek cards, new, taking everything. We're going to see a lot more, as long as this stays hot, we're going to see a lot more of these old card games get reboots during this period, like 100%. The exact same thing that happened in the 90s, whereas everyone started a card game based on a popular IP. But yeah, be interesting.
You're right. It all depends on the demand, because really, you could see, if the demand really just absolutely drops like a rock, and like the prices drop like a rock, there could be people that just, who has submitted PSA who just leave the cards there. They didn't pay attention. No, I'm serious. People that send in,
that'd be amazing, dude.
Send in 500 evolutions cards.
Yeah.
Commons, whatever, reverse foils, and they go to less than what their grading fees are, and they just say, okay, just keep it.
That's brilliant, James. I never considered that. That's a brilliant thought. That's crazy to think about and imagine.
So it really just, you're right. It just depends on keeping this demand, or if it's economic kind of inflation or pumping in the money. It's really on this weird. It's a lot to wrap your head around. So
can they sue you if you do that? Would they take legal, if everyone just was yeah, we're good,
I don't know,
keep the cards?
Yeah, they can. You just put in a credit card or something, so you could just switch that and just not pay it. So it really just depends on you're right, the demand staying put, because there could be a lot of things happen in the next, like I said at the very beginning of this, in the next few months, if it really gets rolling. I know a lot of other countries are still kind of in lockdown, but at least in the US, the vaccines are just, they're coming out, full blast. So it could be in the next few months, we'll see where the demand goes. And that could create a lot of domino effects on not just Pokemon, but other industries as well, so.
Definitely. No, I great conversation, guys. I think that we all brought something to this table today for people to really think about, to really contemplate on, and really think about what's happening now, and really help them forecast for the future, and really plan for things to come, because we are in such an uncertain time right now. There is so much uncertainty, not just in Pokemon, but really the core of our conversation today is the uncertainty and inflation and everything that is going on in this very unique period of time. So all I can say is I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate your insight coming on today and sharing that with everyone. Any last little tidbits of insight or info you want to throw out there?
Well, since since PSA is closed, I'm going to be doing a lot more videos. So if you hate seeing my videos, too bad. They're coming. So. Yeah.
As long as the internet's
That was
working
the
properly.
most self-deprecating plug I think I've ever heard. Hey guys, I'm gonna be making more videos. And
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. I think my message during this time is going to be like, put yourself in a position where you can be patient and calm. Like when everything is crazy and uncertain, put yourself financially and put your collection and your sort of life as much as you can in a position where if things do drop, you can remain calm and kind of be strategic in that, and it doesn't radically change the trajectory of your life in some huge negative way. And because what happens is things can really happen quick. Market changes can really happen quick, and a great saying that both of you guys have said a number of times, and and it's true, is that you just don't want to have to sell out of necessity, particularly when you look at the card and you're like, this card should be much more valuable than this, and I think it will be again in the future. But I put myself in a position where I have to sell it for some sort of life expenses, and that's true in general. So I think, and then enjoy the hobby, be kind to each other, decrease toxicity online and other places. I think that's just like an important message for us all to try and send out. This hobby is built of a bunch of like well-meaning people who are passionate about the cards, about finance, about all sorts of things. And there's plenty of room in this hobby for everyone. And we don't need to gatekeep from anyone, I think. And I think that when a lot of new people come in and there's a lot of craziness and all these sorts of things, it's natural for different people with different perspectives and different needs to kind of push and pull the hobby in different directions. But all of that will definitely be ironed out. And all it takes is like time. And in the meantime, like, you don't want to burn bridges and be unnecessarily like rude or critical of people who probably don't deserve it, who are probably trying to help you and or are very similar to you. So I think that's it's important to keep a level head during uncertain and anxiety producing times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, just reduce as much risk as you can, because it's a very strange time, and a lot of people, except for that quick dip at the beginning of 2020 in the economy, that bounced right back. There's really been a bull market for 10 plus years. And I know most of my analytics say most of my people who watch me are in their 20s, and they were like 10 years old last time there was some kind of downturn, 8 years old. I mean, so a lot of people who are in this haven't seen it bad. Mm-hmm. So just know that it can go fast. So just reduce as much, be comfortable with what you don't be like Jake and stay up at night. Okay. Thinking about, don't be like that. Don't be like that. So
yes, that's advice. Don't be like Jake.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, thank you again so much for being here today. Again, it's such a great conversation, and I hope we can do this each month. I know that that all depends on how busy you guys are and everything like that, but I would love to do this each and every month because I enjoy it. I think everyone else out there really enjoys hearing these conversations and getting a diverse range of perspectives on everything impacting the market. But yeah, good way to sum it up. Be kind to each other, enjoy the hobby, reduce risk, and above all else, just have fun. So, all right, guys. Well, again, thank you so much, and we will see everybody next